UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military projects, false flag alien invasions, PSYOP, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join the discussion now on UAP Cross Fire.
Good evening, greatest audience on the planet. Welcome to the latest edition of UAP Cross Fire on KGRA DB. I am your lead host tonight, Cobra, or sometimes known as Commander Cobra. Charlie Deuce, CC, Coco. There's a long list of names on the rap sheet. Funny that I would use the term rap sheet because my two primary co-hosts tonight, Chris DiPerno and Don Ecker, both former law enforcement officers as well as distinguished UFO, UAP investigators. And
I like how you said that, law enforcement.
Yes, were.
You got that New England accent there.
Yeah, I hear there's somebody from New England that's driving around in LA, but we'll talk about that maybe in a little bit. Good evening, and I always try to end the show with God's peace, which exceeds all knowledge and understanding. I'll throw that in the beginning because I don't know, every time we get towards the end of this show, it's idle, and I'm trying to bring the show out of afterburners, and we're trying to get the speed breaks out and slow things down and get in there, and it just doesn't work. So I'll put the beginning at the end at the beginning, and just say hello and welcome to everybody. You'll notice that two of us look similar in our attire.
Oh, here we go.
And we get
the last time I wore the shirt. Now listen, I have saved that shirt. Okay, you're going to make a comment about the shirt. I'm the only one that not wearing it. But 2 weeks ago, I wore that shirt, and even though threatened by my wife, you know that thing.
How did it go with the barbecue? Wait. How did it go with the barbecue?
I didn't wear it. She wouldn't let me out of the house with it. And you think I'm gonna argue with her?
Okay.
You think
No,
I run my house?
Absolutely not. You're king of your castle. I understand that. No problem.
No, I'm the court jester of my castle. Okay? I'm not anywhere clear near. She keeps me around for amusement. I'm the court jester.
Excellent. Well, it's good to know. It's good to know your role, and you're in the court. So that's which is kind of an interesting pun, since you both spent plenty of time in court. So there you go. See, I think
there you go.
That fits. So you were saying about not having the attire on tonight. You have it in a very safe.
We had company over for dinner.
Oh, not allowed. This is definitely not a company wearing company shirt, dinner company shirt.
No, so I had the evil eye look at me, and I said, "I'll put on, honey, a nice polo shirt." But then halfway through the show, I'll probably go sneak in the room and get my shirt, my uniform shirt for this show. God help me.
And he was a Marine too. He knows about being.
Don't give me that crap about Marine. How many times did your wife say this is what you're going to do, and you say, "No, I'm not." Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Marine or not. Okay.
Next part. We hear it's hot as Hades hinges in California. Aside from that, Mr. Ecker, how are you?
Actually, I'm glad we're doing this show. I'm not going to go into detail, but I'm glad we're doing this show tonight, and it wasn't last night, because I was socially unacceptable all the way around, 360 degrees. It was like somebody came up and took a big, healthy dump into my mess kit, okay? That's where I was last night. But I've had most of the day to get over it, so.
But you're feeling much better now, like in John Carpenter's version of the movie The Thing. I'm all better now.
I got my tea.
You have your tea. Well, that's excellent. Well, gentlemen, the subject that we kind of set ourselves up for tonight started because I had a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks back, I had picked up a copy of the book, Military Response to UFO Activity. It's Dr. Stephen Cox's book. I don't know Dr. Cox. I'm kind of interested. There's some stuff that he writes that I really, really like, and there's some stuff that I kind of askew a glance at some of the things that are in there, but I thought it was kind of a fun place to bring it together because a lot of the things that we have covered over the year plus that we've been doing this is how the military interacts with this, because the military is kind of the primary agent for the government's UFO. And specifically, we've probably have centered on the Air Force more than anybody else, but we've had some pretty interesting events that have come up with the Navy and the Army going forward. Plus, the world's militaries seem to be always the first legion that gets dispatched because we treat UFOs, UAP incidents, usually as some kind of a threat or a possible threat to a nation's sovereignty and security. So, in getting ready for this and looking at this, one of the most interesting ones I wanted to start with, and I think you both have talked about this case in the past. In 1953, sometimes referred to, let me check my notes, Paradise Valley crash or the Kingman crash, where there is been some recent release of documents, at least in the clickbait kind of articles that are hitting around the internet. And that's something I'm going to keep coming back to tonight, how the streaming media part of the internet seems to be bringing up more articles, more what I consider clickbait that really don't have a lot of fluff. The pictures don't even match with a lot of the stories, but it's generally, I must be generating clicks because more stories keep showing up, obviously under the new ways that the stories are presented when what you're looking at. But let's talk about Kingman and Paradise. Don, I'll start with you because I'm almost positive you have taken me through this once before with some detail. Along Route 66, one of the most storied roadways in the United States. It has a very interesting paranormal as well as UFO, UAP kind of activity along that long stretch of road. I'm very proud to say I've driven almost every piece of that road over the years. It's one of my personal hopes to completely cover every stretch, but I've covered most of it over the years of flying and working in the Southwest. What's your thoughts on Kingman?
Well, to tell you the truth, Commander Cobra, that is a case that I have not given any thought to in probably 25, 30 years. I don't believe it was me that talked you through that case some time ago. I have no recollection of that. And to tell you the truth, that's a case that when we were doing the magazine, UFO magazine, that particular case showed up very rarely. And there was so much else going on. I mean, I'm not complaining or anything, but there was so much else going on. And that was so far in the past, even from the 90s,
sure,
that I didn't give it a lot of thought or research. So I apologize for that.
All right, Chris.
Well, I think you're talking about the Paradise Valley crash.
Correct.
Also known as the Kingman crash in 1953 in Arizona. But we know there was a guy, I believe his name was Fritz Warner. Am I correct on that?
I
Fritz
believe
Warner?
that's correct.
That's right. And Warner had a phony name. I think it was Stencil. And he used to discuss the situation. Kingman, there were some documents that were leaked. Stencil or Warner was an Air Force engineer who studied the impact of nuclear bombs. And he started studying that, and he believed that this crash was supposed to be legitimate. However, I've never seen the documents that they referred to that were leaked out. Now there was Christopher Mellon released a redacted version of this conversation that they had. I think it was 20 years ago. Am I right, Commander?
Correct.
Right. Okay. So 20 years ago, there was a conversation happening that they believed that they're going to keep this crash quiet and that they had evidence of the crash, and they brought in engineers like this Warner guy and stuff to take a look at this, debris of the crash and stuff. And then whatever they released from this, it was redacted. And so once again, we have a situation where we are not truthful to the American people the military comes in and says, we got to cover this up. We got to, put this to bed. And so this is one of those stories where it's probably had a lot of good information for disclosure, but it was never brought out because the military says, we're not going to do it. And this is what we see with all the military when they get involved in some of these crashes. They go heart bent on trying to cover this up. And this is no different. I mean, there's people
and it's
who
usually
say
the Air Force.
Well, yeah, the Air Force was involved with this. And the thing is, well, the person that really goes there is that they bring in these type of experts, and then they threaten these experts to keep their mouth shut after they figure out what the hell is going on. So it's a situation where, you got this information and you do all this fine detail work because they had experts in the Kingman crash. And then they say, well, you can't do anything with it. We're not going to tell the public.
So I'm going to pose two things to you. Let's try a quick analysis on it. This is the reason.
Oh, by the way, Commander, can I just interrupt you for 1 second?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. I wanted to just try to to see who our next commander-in-chief is going to be for the military there. So just thought I'd show you the new commander-in-chief.
Thanks. I'm glad that we were
able to. Stone face. He's stone face.
I'm not going to forget that, Chris.
Okay, so back to the show, not the political show, but the UAP show.
I just had to throw that in there. I'm sorry.
Here's what I want to drive at. Two things. Let's take a look and say this occurred, and it occurs as Stoneman reports that it occurred. And 50 years later, he signs the affidavit. The redacted report comes out from one of the assistant secretaries of defense or Air Force on there. In fact, Christopher Mellon, who seems to pop in and pop out of these things from time to time. And all the reports and pieces that if people really knew what happened, they would be just, amazed. The world would grind to a stop because it came out. There was a lot of science. There was a lot of science and tech going on, a lot of research and development going on into, obviously at that time period, very much was emphasizing on atomic and nuclear weapons, radar activity that was going on. A lot of things going on in that area. Plus, there's always those little reports that come in about experimental aircraft, anti-gravity, going back to the last show that we talked about, where we spoke about some of the possibilities of that.
Well,
so you have two ways this goes. We exploit what looks like a UFO event and go false flag. No other really better word to use. The current vernacular is we build this up and we start throwing out, and we have the perfect groups of people to go out and put that information out for that sleight of hand, that the deception aspect of it. And then we have the possibility that this really did occur and they had to button it up.
Well, I think one of the reasons they buttoned it up, Commander, didn't they try to button this up because they actually found bodies? I think they found
that's the claim.
4 bodies in there.
Well, that's the claim. But I've heard there's claims that there's bodies at a number of these.
Well, yeah.
The Aztec.
But I mean,
obviously.
Now Aztec was a little different. If I remember right, wasn't Aztec the one there? They found mutilated human bodies parts in that crash.
Well, all kinds of reports of what had happened there. Plus, there is at Aztec, there's all that other parts of it, how the military came in, and this has been documented, built large concrete foundations so that they could bring heavy equipment in to move materials out of there. They because the ground, the sandy ground, the soft ground would not allow the material. So that there's some artifacts there. Same thing kind of comes up here with Paradise Valley Kingman, as well as Roswell, that throw that in it, that there was some kind of activity. Now, what generated that activity? Is it extraterrestrial encounter, or is it man-made situation that came up.
Now, a new report just came out. I read it in the MUFON Journal, and I'm not sure if I believe it or not, but now they're turning around saying that Roswell was ours. And the best way to cover up our technology. Well, I'm just telling you what was reported, Don. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying to you that it's been now reported where people believe that was ours, because we did have some good technology back then. But how do
From
you
Germany?
What? Yeah, you're right. We did a show on the UFOs from Germany, and they were highly advanced when it comes to technology. But I mean,
do you guys travel occasionally up to Kevin Randall's blog spot? Another perspective.
No.
Well, you ought to check it out.
At it.
I'm sorry.
I know he's very good when it comes to Roswell. He's
one of the premier Roswell researchers, and he has a new entry up there. He did a couple of days ago, and if it's not on the very top, just scroll down. But he basically made another command decision that Roswell is exactly what it was purported to be, which is a crash of an unknown craft from who knows where. Now, I had something else I wanted to say, but I don't want to derail us, so I'm going to hold off on that. But it's something that it has nothing to do with UAPs on the surface, but it is something that's very interesting. So all right. I'll shut up now.
No, and Don, I don't disagree because you don't know what the story is with Roswell. The story has changed so many times in Roswell that the military sends it in 5 different directions, and that's what they're good at. I will tell you one thing. I think the military is absolutely great at disinformation campaigns, because they send you in 5 different directions. You forget about where the real direction is going, because everybody goes,
hey, I've seen Roswell described as an A6 variant of a V2 rocket. I've seen people try to convince everybody it was a Japanese Fugo balloon 2 years after the war, and Fugo balloons were made out of rice paper. I've seen it was a weather balloon, it was this, it was that. And all those explanations have totally collapsed, not to mention the fact that 3 years of communications from the 509th that by law had to remain there totally freaking disappeared, especially with the year of 47, which is what we're talking about. So yeah, they've been covering that up forever. On the 50th anniversary of Roswell, okay, back in 97, I did, from the magazine, I did a whole slew of reports about that, including the NBC Nightly News. They had me on. And I got to tell you, the Air Force and the public spokesman, this colonel, I forget his name now, that was out there giving a press briefing with their book, Roswell Case Closed, which, incidentally, they didn't give to the press ahead of time. They didn't want anybody to ask inconvenient questions. We're trying to pass off NASA photographs from 1972 as a possible object that the public might have thought they saw in 1947. Look, it's been a dog and pony show with all kinds of sexual intercourse ever since. And the bottom line is, okay, those guys wouldn't know the truth if it jumped up and bit them on their nappy blue uniform.
Wow.
I'll shut up now.
No, I can't disagree with you.
So there is a pattern that occurs here. And it's when I get to some personalities, some folks that I really, really respect deeply, there's an interesting thing that comes up, and Don brings it up. I think one part of it, because I am very undecided on Roswell. Been there a couple times, and I hate the way I am, but sometimes I blow with the breeze. And it seems like when I see the next series of returns to Roswell, I will fall into on either side. So mark me down as 50-50. There is no doubt, because the 509th is there, there is the activity level and the crazy security and the post World War II, now Cold War starting up, Soviet threat situation going on. We know for a fact there is a very plausible or a very identifiable thing that's going on there with the high altitude balloons that are going to be launched from there. So that kind of fits sometimes, and it doesn't in other places. Right?
But here's the problem I have with Roswell, Commander, is that first of all, as I said before, the government is great at making you go 3 different ways to Sunday. They can take a story and change it so much where they got people arguing, just like we have disagreements here, on Roswell or any other of these crashes, because they put out 5 or 6 different stories, and one person believes this one, the other person. But the thing with Roswell is that what gets me is that Jesse Marcel was an expert in radar. Not only was he an intelligence officer, but he was very well acclimated into the use of radar, and he was very well briefed into these weather balloons. So when that happens, he knows by his experience with radar, he knows with his experience on these weather balloons, because he was read into the program from what I've read, and that he would have said, "This is a weather balloon. We gotta go." Now, why would you, if you had something that sensitive, why would you go with a UFO story?
Right.
Why would you not go with something else that people would forget about?
You're leading into an area because this pattern keeps repeating, and I think that the reason Roswell's is so important is an algorithm, I guess is the word you would use today, to look at other events, because we follow this. There seems to be an exclamation of truth that triggers other agencies, other levels of government that responds very rapidly after that. So let's just take that at face value. UFO story comes out, right? And it hits the press. I want you to think about this, taking nothing away from Colonel Marcel. Why would you say that if you are read into all these programs? Why would that be the place? Why would those words come out for that? I don't have a good explanation for that.
Well, first off, Charlie Deuce, there are 2 types of balloons. There were the weather balloons, and these guys were a nuclear delivery system. They wanted to know where the wind was blowing. And there were the other balloons.
Right, the surveillance balloons, that's correct.
That were fixed with acoustic devices
and
to try to detect Soviet nuclear detonations.
Right.
Well, the Russians didn't have a bomb that they could even test until 1949. All right. And it was Marcel, a lot of people don't know this, that ended up briefing Harry Truman about that. Were you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, and incidentally, that's where he got kicked up to lieutenant colonel when he retired for meritorious service. Now, Marcel, I never met Marcel. I met his son. I knew his son, who was a Air Guard brigadier general and a physician. As a matter of fact, I took him. He was one of the guys I took with me down to Orlando and Disney in '95, because he talked about what happened when his dad came back that first night with a box of debris.
Right.
And it wasn't weather balloons.
Right.
Okay. So what the debris was, hey, I don't know. Hell, I wasn't there. But I will tell you this, it was, according to Marcel, Brigadier General Marcel, it was very unusual and strange. Now, something else that you may not be aware of. Maybe you are. But Mac Brazel, the rancher that supposedly discovered this debris field, was out driving his sheep. And he came across this huge debris field. Now, weather balloons, okay, they may make a mess, a small mess when they come down, but nothing like what Mac Brazel described. He took a bunch of this stuff into Roswell to the sheriff and said, hey, I think there was an airplane that crashed on my ranch land. Here's some of the debris. That's when the sheriff called up the 509th and ended up with Sheridan Cavett, a CIC guy, and Jesse Marcel, the base intelligence officer, to drive out there and take a look. Now, later, Sheridan Cavett was a true believer.
Right.
He went to his grave lying and denying any of this happened. Okay. Well, we know it did. I talked at one point to General, God, I'm trying to remember his name now. He was one of the officers at the time, was a lieutenant or a full colonel down in Fort Worth. Okay, when they flew that material down to Texas. And according to him, he had received a call from one of the high-ranking generals back at the Pentagon telling him, this is what he told me, you will keep your mouth shut. This is not something we're going to discuss ever. This is above top secret. Well, right there. Okay. Now, when a general officer tells me, who was a mere sergeant, okay, this is what the guy told me. I've got no doubt this man was telling it to me just like he recalled it.
Right.
And I got to say this much. Even when I talked to him, which was about 91 or 92, he was still shaken up about it.
Sure.
Now, I don't know how far into the program he might have been read, but whatever that was that came down, I am convinced it was no V2 rocket with an A6 variant where they had a shaved monkey in there. Right. That was another story that they tried to float.
Absolutely.
For a while.
Right.
Okay. So what it was, I don't know. But hey, according to Phil Corso, another guy that never gets his due, Corso told me when I talked to him on the phone, he was coming out to California after he got back from Italy. And we were going to sit down and have a chat. And then, unfortunately, he died. Okay. Now, I knew people that knew Corso. He was something else, believe me. And when I met him, he was chewing my ass for something he thought I did that I didn't do. Okay. But we got that straightened out. And I'm always sorry, but he claimed, and why he would lie. I mean, I know this guy's background, Corso's background. He claimed he saw the bodies as they were being shipped and they were being stored overnight. Now, once again, I don't know. But I got to tell you, the man was convincing. So, if there were bodies, and I think there were, because I interviewed a first-hand witness there, Thomas Gonzalez, who was one of the airmen that was detailed from T Squadron to go out and clean up the debris field, who told me specifically there were 4 bodies there. 3 were dead, 1 was still alive. That communicated with him. This is what he told me. And I got to say, when you have that much, and as a cop, Chris, when you have that much information flowing in from witnesses, you got to give some credence to the story. I do.
Sure you do.
Right.
And this is the difference, what we see, Don, as being police officers. we shared information with our fellow cops. But when you get to UFO, you get to ufology, and you get to these scientists, and I want to go back a little bit even farther. Let's go back to the Manhattan Project. You see how they developed the Manhattan Project. One scientist wasn't allowed to talk to the other one. Groves and Oppenheimer were at odds with each other because Groves said, "No, these people are not allowed to talk to these people, and these people can't talk to these people, and they're going to be separated, and there's going to be no discussion." And Oppenheimer says, "How are we going to do this if you don't let scientists talk to each other?" Well, the same thing with the Kingman's case. The problem is you get Stencil there. He goes out, and he's out on loan from goes to the Atomic Energy Commission. They give him a cock and bull story that this is a highly secretive test flight and it crashed, and we want you to look at. If they knew what it was, they just pick up the debris and go somewhere. But they didn't do that. So they send this guy out. He can't even talk to the other people on the bus. He's reported that he says, "Hey, I was guarded by 2 MPs. I'm not allowed to talk to anybody. They shipped me out there, and they said, you do this. You don't talk to anybody else. You don't get involved with anybody else. And then you get escorted by 2 MPs back on the bus, and you do your report only to us, and you never talk about this again." But we've seen this time and time again, what the military does. They are experts when it comes to saying, okay, disinformation or compartmentalizing everything.
To be fair, there's reasons for that.
I'm not disputing that, Commander, but
those reasons can easily be grafted into situations that do not require it, or at some period of time. So you touched upon one very important part of this. You talked about the Manhattan Project.
Mm-hmm.
There's still sensitivity in the Manhattan Project that it got busted. That there were scientists, despite all the controls they had, and when you think about the magnitude of the work that they did, but Joe Stalin and the Soviets weren't very far behind, knowing almost page for page.
They had agents in there.
They had sympathizers that sent them the material, because the very people that they needed to work, they knew were risks because of their communist backgrounds, whatever it was, because they came from the world of academia. They knew what they were up against. I mean,
Oppenheimer, for all intents and purposes,
flirted the line
big commie sympathizer.
He flirted the line back and forth, and then there was.
So was Edward Teller.
And then, of course, you have the belief that, we shouldn't have done what we did. We should have done a demonstration. And that story has been stratified and romanticized so that, depending on who's telling the story, you have some sympathetic or not sympathetic viewpoint that comes out. That affects how we see UAP events. This business of trying to maintain control. How about the part, I believe it starts with Roswell, of the reports that Stalin is modifying, altering, disfigured, and
right.
I can't think of the right word.
I think Leslie Keene's put out that report.
And trying to scare the Americans by bringing over a craft with these people that have been surgically altered to have this alien capability to scare us.
Bullshit.
The problem with that BS remark is, and I tend to agree with you, Don, the problem I have with that is when you have silted the water so much, it allows something like that theory to have some, it's going to grab some purchase. It's going to get people to pay attention to it because it's all over the place. And here's the reason I wanted to talk Roswell and bring it in. So thank you for doing that. I always go back to the first statements. I'm sure you too, that is something that is primary. Absolutely. When you write it in your notebook, that first statement, and then as the person calms down or gets more agitated while you're doing an interview, you go back and you start seeing how the story changes or where the deviations come in. But that very first statement on Roswell is so unscripted, correct? It seems so unbelievably bold, honest. It seems that it triggers everything up. It's not like today. That took hours. That took probably close to a day or at least a half a day to get out, get to newspapers, and then possibly by a phone call for the reaction to start. And how quickly it snaps after that. The bodies that show up to get control of the situation, to set the story, to set it straight. But
are you referring to the initial
report,
the Army recovered a flying
right,
disc,
and the
blah,
initial
blah, blah.
news story that goes out.
Also, in direct connection with that, okay, I can recall, and it's going back 25 years ago, around the time of the 50th anniversary, that they were trying to blame the press officer
right
for releasing that story. Now, look, this was the most elite military base on the planet in 1947. The security there, I'm not going overboard by saying it was draconian. Nothing got out of that base without Colonel Blanchard's okay with it. Okay? So, initially, Blanchard, must have been convinced that this was nothing mundane. This was something extraordinary. I just wanted to get that out there.
Right. Yeah, so why would he allow that press release then?
Because it's true?
Yeah, but if it was true, that's like saying, God forbid, a nuke explodes on a base and you have a problem. You're not going to admit to that. I'm telling you right now, the first thing you say is you're not going to say it. There's protocols they're going to have. You're going to say there was an accident. You're going to go through all those things, but you're not going to do that. This is the equivalent of that event. And I know we're pretty early in how this comes out. So now this is where I start to say the credibility factor goes up. This is so absolutely mind-bending different. So far out of the realm of control.
Remember, Commander,
this is how this slips out. Yes.
Remember, this was weeks before the National Security Act.
Correct.
The Air Force being stripped out of the Army, and the Central Intelligence Agency coming into existence. Immediately following, in the aftermath of whatever it was that happened there, we get the United States Air Force instead of the United States Army Air Force, their own separate entity. We get the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. We didn't have one before. Oh, we had intelligence during the war, but we didn't have anybody that was directly intelligence like the CIA.
I have to disagree with you there, Don. Don, we had the OSS. And the OSS was eliminated because the OSS worked directly for the president and no one liked it. And Truman got tricked on that one. So you're not correct on that. And just because 2 weeks later these organizations come out, they were ready for those organizations. Those just didn't pop up 24 hours after those documents were signed. Those activities were already going on leading up to the signing of the National Security Act. All those things were in place. The Air Force had separated out of the Army 4 years before. 1945, the Air Force was not part of the Army. It may have wore the same uniform and had AAF on it, but they had changed the name 3 times during the war to further separate it. These didn't just happen. It just did not happen when it's signed. But
Commander,
before it is it's so accurate to say that because this is coming and this event occurs, it shows we cannot allow this kind of information to ever slip out again without a plan.
Right. But Commander, you all, and Don, you know this too. Okay. No press release officer is going to let out any kind of statement first without talking to the people who are actually at the scene and get an absolute detail, because he's got to have names. When he goes to Blanchard, he's got to say, Lieutenant so-and-so told me this, Captain so-and-so told me this, Sergeant so-and-so told me this. I drafted up what they said or what they believe that this is. Here it is. Now, in police work, it's called locking a person in their story, because you're right. The first time they give a story is probably the best one. The reason being is because psychologically, humans
you're not filling in any facts. You're just giving what you remember. You're not putting any extra in there.
Right, because after the second and third time, you start embellishing.
Right.
And you got to be very
that's
careful.
a bad word right now. You're not supposed to be talking about embellishing. There's a lot of stuff going on embellishing. Italy, Iraq, they're both countries that start with I'm sorry, I'm going down something you don't want to talk
Tim Walz.
Yeah, I knew that name was going to pop up sooner or later on this show. Anyways, getting back to ufology here for a second. You know that the press release officer then goes to Blanchard and he says, here's the detail. He's got to sign off on it. So Don is right. They're not going to take a crap without making sure Blanchard knows exactly how that crap's going to happen. And so when that thing is released, you know, a bunch of people signed off on it. This guy just didn't go out and put that story out because he'd be out in Alaska right now working the midnight shift. You know what I mean? If he did something stupid like that. Well, it's true, Don. I mean, you know how the military works. If you don't give it to the top.
So again, the absolute premier unit for aerial delivery of nuclear weapons, atomic weapons at that point, nuclear weapons, is so shaken, they throw out this story. They allow this to go out on face value. First question I'm going to ask you both. Why would they release a statement at all? Why?
Because too many people knew about it.
No.
Well, for one thing,
nobody knew about it. Nobody knew about
UFOs,
it. There's less than 100 people in Arizona, New Mexico,
Are you
Nevada.
talking about Kingman or are you talking about Roswell?
Roswell.
Flying saucers were being reported all across the United States.
Right.
Okay. The government was getting tons of public inquiries about what the hell are those things up there? Are they real? I mean, here's a commercial airline pilot said he saw one flying out of Los Angeles. Is that true? You know, can they really go that fast? And then let's not forget Idaho businessman Kenneth Arnold,
right,
who was an accomplished private pilot flying in his aircraft over near Mount Rainier. He sees 9, actually not disc-shaped, but kind of like a sole on a shoe, a heel on a shoe.
Right, that shape.
Flying in a direct line, parallel course, one after another. And he looked at those and what in the hell are they? And then he did a rough computation on how fast they were going. 1947, June the 24th, our frontline fighter at that time was the P-51 Mustang, which could achieve 450 miles an hour in level flight. And he computed these things were going anywhere between 1,200 to 1,600 miles an hour. My God, can you imagine the shock he must have felt? And he radioed it in to wherever the hell he was aiming for. And when he landed, they had the press there to interview him. So yeah, this was big news. So maybe Blanchard, who knows? Maybe he saw his first star by polishing his apple. Hey, the 509th caught one.
We got one.
Who knows?
No, I mean, I think it's a really good point. And I think that's a really good explanation because those are the questions I've come up with similar answers why this would come out the way it is, because it's somewhat inconcurrent sometimes to me when I look at the kinds of security that they had there, and very draconian, as you said, that anything like this occurs, why they would be allowing a press release to come out, especially for the isolation, the relative small numbers of people, the slow slow communications. You're talking landline telephones. Not everybody even had a telephone. Newspapers are the primary way the story goes out. Telegraph, teletype is the way most things, the wires, news going out on the wire to the news services to be picked up. And that's really how the story goes out. Another interesting part with this, it kind of goes dormant, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't until like the 70s that this reoccurs, that there's a kind of like an awakening of what happened at Roswell.
Who was it that interviewed Marcel back in the 70s? And that's when the story started hitting again.
He was living in Louisiana at the time, and he was interviewed at a TV station there. Somehow, somebody that knew Stanton Friedman got on the horn, called Friedman up, and told him about this guy, Jesse Marcel.
Right.
And it kind of took off from there. Now, in the interim, Bill Moore, who is a rather today very infamous name in the UFO field, ended up co-authoring the first book on Roswell that came out in 1980. Now, there were still people that recalled Roswell. Donald Kehoe, of course, knew about Roswell. And Ivan Sanderson knew about Roswell. Richard Hall knew about Roswell. But they didn't, they had too many other things going on. They weren't worried about it. Roswell was, that's in the dusty past. But Roswell, for the most part, as far as the public, was totally unknown.
All right, let me throw a monkey wrench into this thing because I love doing that.
I love monkey wrenches.
Roswell was a black swan project. Because our government has done tremendous amount of work with black swan projects. They have done disinformation campaigns. Suppose they wanted the Russians and the Chinese to know, hey, we got it down. Maybe there was nothing there, but they put out a story to say, hey, we got a UFO. We got a spacecraft, and of course, what's the Russians going to do? The Russians are going to think, wow, what do they got? What can they get from it? Are we going to be in danger? I mean, we throw it out. Just look at the Nimitz.
So, Chris, I heard many years back, I heard a remark that very similar to what you just made, because we knew that there was a crash in Europe, and we thought the Soviets had got their hands on something before us.
That is correct.
And that this was to make them think we were not too far behind.
And we've done that before. We have done all kinds of black swan projects. I call them black swan projects. These are projects where they come up with so many different things for disinformation or to start a coup. And we were very good at overthrowing governments back then. We put out all kinds of disinformation things.
We weren't the only ones that were involved in such activities.
But I mean, we were
by heady world that we lived in those days.
No, but I mean, we were the varsity when it came to it. I mean, they came up with a project called Operation Northwood to put a remote. Now think about this: they wanted to put a drone that was a 747 or some big jet airplane with tape recorded voices to fly near Cuba and to get in a war for Cuba to make a phony shoot down of this plane. They were going to blow it up. There was going to be nobody on it. They were going to remote control this plane near the edge of Cuba, blow it up with people, tape recorded voices, screaming, howling, we're under attack. And Kennedy said, no way, you're not going to do this. And look at all the medical projects that soldiers, unbeknownst to them, were given all kinds of injections or submitted to medical tests or nuclear tests. So, even though I believe that Roswell was still a craft, it's in my back of my mind that say, these guys could have came up with this cockamamie story just to throw the Russians off.
Operation Mockingbird comes to mind when you were talking about that.
Yeah. There you go.
Organized use of the press to go forward. And if you go to that, that's a 60s, late 50s, 60s. I forgot the exact date for Mockingbird, because I don't really think whatever it is now, it hasn't changed very much. And again, all three of us have worn the uniform. I understand why we play some of those games that we do. The problem is it's like a drug. You can't, once you taste it, you're hooked. You can't give up on it. It's too easy. It's too easy to convince yourself that you're doing right by doing wrong. I mean,
because you always repeat success. When you got success, you want to repeat it again, right? Or
worse, when you lose, you figure, let me go double or nothing on the next one, and I'll make up and be back ahead on the other side. Because I'm the good guys, they're the bad guys. Now, in all this, this is which makes me crazy. And when we're approaching break time, I'm going to jump to a couple personalities, well known to all of us here, to help try to get explanation of why we're at. There is truth in these events.
Sure.
I think the fact that controlling that truth is more important than anything else. So when you talk about a false flag or a black swan type of event, I think that's just part of the playbook, as you're saying, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't
this,
take what we want.
Don, you know this. The best way to convince somebody of your falseness or a lie is to put some truth between two lies. You
Look,
put a little bit of truth.
we played games in Vietnam.
Okay. Absolutely.
I was involved with intelligence, and I'm telling you, we played those games, psychological, and then more real games. But hell, look at what the CIA and the Special Forces did in the Philippines when those tribesmen, what were they called, Cobra, the Huck? Filipino tribesmen. They were playing on their mythology. They went out, would catch some of these terrorist fighters, kill them, hang them upside down from a tree, drain them of blood, totally drain them of blood, and then they started floating the idea that there were vampires out in the forest.
Well, one of the ones I remember from your era, Don, was the analysis of the Vietnamese culture, that if you weren't properly prepared, and your body was released in a proper way, your spirit would wander. So they actually had airplanes that would play music and haunting sounds and have people talking, saying that they were wandering. Don't fight. You're going to die on this battlefield. You're not near your ancestral home. Your soul will be cursed to wander the face of the earth. And it was a very inexpensive but effective way to unnerve. And that's gone on. So you're absolutely right that the psychological factor, I think some of the events that we have seen reported are to cover activities. You all know my strong feelings on that documented that there were seeding in the 60s, UFO conferences with false information just to figure out what people were seeing and to keep that fever going.
And Commander, just like you and I talked before, and I was a skeptic of it, but I'm a true believer of it now. Look at the Nimitz incident. I mean, I believe, as you, those are our crafts. I mean, I am totally convinced that we have conquered anti-gravity, and those were our crafts. And people said, well, no, they can't be because they would never do anything dangerous like that. Bullshit. Bullshit. I'm sorry, Don, I took your line. And I'm saying to myself,
my line was, you sons of bitches.
Yeah, well, okay, I'll do that.
That's the second half of the show.
The bottom line is Our government will do those type of things to convince our adversaries of anything they want, and they got this whole story. And you know,
Don,
you and I discussed it.
back me up on this. I'm not convinced it's just our adversaries we're trying to convince. I'm going to jump in a little bit and think that prime target number one is convincing the U.S. public what to be convinced, and then move on from there.
Hey, we see this ongoing operation every night we turn on the news. Okay?
No doubt.
Talk about bought, paid for propaganda and bullshit. Oh yeah, that's the nightly news. Sorry, gang, didn't mean to poop in your.
No, not at all.
Sure.
But again, in that nightly news, which is pretty much a thing of the past, have you noticed how much UAP stories are in the available data dump clickbait storylines that show up on your roving, whatever your search engine, you know, if you use Edge or Google, there's constantly coming up, those stories constantly pop up. And my very unprofessional logging of it over the last 6 months, more than half of the UAP related stories connect with release of files, a person has come forward, deathbed type confession, newly released, newly found documents, whistleblower. Now, of course, we had all the activity a year ago on Capitol Hill. And now, of course, we're into the election season. That's all disappeared. But all the candidates have talked about this early on in the primary seasons. They all spoke to this.
Look, I want to, when we take our break and then come back, I want to talk about something I just saw. All right. As a matter of fact, I saw it today. It was on Facebook. It was one of those reels. Are you familiar with the reels? Those short. Okay. Yeah. I saw something there and I thought, oh my, this is interesting. I'm going to bring this up tonight on UAP. So, yeah.
All right. Folks, thank you for hanging in with us. UAP Cross Fire, Chris DePerno, Don Ecker, Commander Cobra here with you. We'll be back in approximately 2 to 3 minutes on the other side of our break. Please stay with us and send the questions in. Once again, I'm blocked out of comments, but my co-hosts will be able to tell us what's going on. Welcome back to UAP Crossfire on KGR Radio, KGR Radio DB. My guest hosts, Chris DePerno, Don Ecker, and myself, Commander Cobra, hello, greatest audience on the planet. Welcome back. Don, you wanted to start out with something before we jumped into a couple of qualities that you had seen.
You didn't see my shirt?
Oh, I saw your shirt.
Hey, looking good, buddy. Looking good. Yeah. Well, you know, one thing, and this is something that probably most civilians, I'm going to say civilians, in the regard of UFOs being, many people find more of a hobby than, you know, the way the three of us have gone at it. But most people don't consider all the aspects that are molded into this topic. Okay, and it's vast. It goes so far beyond lights in the sky or Navy ships seeing underwater lights. I mean, it's beyond truly beyond comprehension. Well, the one thing, and I try to keep my eyes open for it, and I know you guys do, is the intelligence feed that often goes into this. And there are people out there in the field that traditionally, for years, have been fed stuff. Most civilian researchers don't have the benefit of having been an investigator or military or anything like that. So they may be apt to accept things at face value. Now, today I saw a reel on Facebook that came from Linda Moulton Howe. Now, Linda Howe was a reporter going back. many years. Okay. I saw back in, I think it was 81, I was living then with my former wife in Denver. She was out of Denver. Her report on a strange harvest involving cattle mutilation. Okay, now, over the years, and I didn't really meet her until about 88. And in full disclosure, she never was very comfortable around me. Why? I'm not sure. But my wife's over here in the corner snickering. But
actually, valuable commentary by her remarks.
Vicky often said, my wife often said that I can be too intense. Well, that's probably true.
We've never seen it on the show.
Yeah, I can be too intense. Well, at any rate, we clashed several times over the years. Nothing serious, but on some cases that she was involved in that turned out to be total crap. Okay. Now, so as a result, when I see stuff that Linda puts out, I look at it with a very critical eye. Now, I saw something today that I thought, oh my God, I wonder if she read my report. And basically, this allegedly came to her from military contacts, all right, that there are two factions of extraterrestrials that are in conflict with each other. Okay, and I've told you that my theories on that a long time ago.
Absolutely.
But that there is a plan down the road to exterminate humanity, basically, to wipe us out so they can have the planet for themselves. Yeah. Now, this kind of fear porn, I refer to it as fear porn. Well, hell, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But if I had something like that in my craw, okay, that I wanted to eventually get out to the public, I'm going to have some damn evidence and proof for it. I'm not just going to throw it out there, because what use is throwing it out there, okay? But then I began thinking intelligence-wise. Now, hey, as a population, Americans today are as divided and as divisive as any time in our history, going back to 2 points in history, right before the Civil War and right before the Revolutionary War really kicked off.
Sure.
Okay? Never in our history have we been more divisive. And what does that do? Well, for the powers that be, okay, that's very handy. Because if you're too involved with squabbling with that bunch over there, okay, you're not seeing what's happening right here in front of you. And intelligence, I thought this would be a perfect ploy to feed into something as divisive, because it is, as the UFO UAP field. Now, gentlemen, I'd be very interested in your thoughts about that.
Chris, you want to go first? Or do you want me to jump?
No, you jump first.
Well, Don, I think you know from the past that we've talked, I completely agree. I think it's part of the playbook. I think it is a very handy way to generate conversation attention. I think it started earnestly with the ability to help cover up types of technology and specifically aircraft that we were probably bringing online 50s, 60s, and 70s. Then as social unrest has grown, as the world government kind of situation, because I don't think you can have this conversation and not separate it out of that. But I think that there's two parts that have to be respected. So yes, I agree that this is a methodology to help maintain control. You can't control the internet, so you flood the internet with information so that the truth is now distilled in a greater field of other interesting things to look at. You find organizations, personalities, people that are, if not malleable, at least can be useful for passing the information on. And I think everyone's been guilty of that at some point in their life. You hear something and it's given to you as you know, we have this crisis that we have to handle, but it has to be handled discreetly. Think of things that have happened in your family or with friends or with where you worked, and you go and try to do stuff. And ultimately, it's contrived. It was designed to cover something else up. It was to get people's attention off of something that the person that set this up didn't want to have. I think that that's very, very plausible. I think it's very, very active that's going on. But if our kin belief is true, that tells me there has to be something at the basis of this that makes it worth to do that. That our belief that we do have extraterrestrial presence, activity, craft, there has to be some level of it. Now, how nefarious, how amicable, what kind of agreements have been made, what kinds of bills might be coming due on agreements, conflicts that we're caught between, that we're the battleground, our own hubris that we are the most important entities in this entire universe, all works perfectly in hand with this situation. So I agree with you.
I'm gonna just say a couple things. First of all, Don, your paper was excellent. It's really good. But here's the one thing that, you know, I started thinking about after reading your paper a while back is, what have they done for us? They haven't done a damn thing. I mean, I get these stories all the time. Oh, they're nice. They want to help the planet. And in your paper, you're saying there's a hostile race out there. Well, first of all, I will tell you, if they're as smart as we think they are, they're going to just sit back and make some popcorn and get a soda and watch us kill ourselves. They don't have to interfere at all. They can sit back and just watch us, because we're on the brink of World War III, and we all know it. I mean, the Middle East is breaking up. Europe is breaking up. Everybody wants to go to war.
Here's the thing about that, Chris. We all know it. You're right. But the American people have heard it, but they don't know it.
Well, that's true. But here's the other thing about that is that if, in fact, we have extraterrestrials walking among us, which Harvard professors have said, other known scientists have said, that they look just like us and they're walking among us. They haven't done a damn thing for us. So how do you think, I mean, this is the way I look at it, is that they're walking among us. If they are so smart and they're so far advanced than us, why don't they come and help cure cancer? And I'll tell you the other thing about this. I was thinking about as you were saying, if the government let's say the government made an agreement with these people and said, yeah, you can go ahead and abduct these people, as that's rumored to be. Who's going to go to jail for that? Because let me tell you something. If they try to take my fat ass out of my house, that's kidnapping and assault. And if my government said, yeah, go ahead and take them, believe me, I mean, you're going to have an overthrow. You're going to have people, anarchy. You're going to have riots, because if people have been abducted and we find out that the U.S. government made a deal with them to do that, I mean, how do you feel if you're
Chris,
an abductee?
If that's the case, and I think there's a very, very strong case for that. It's not just the U.S. government. You're talking most of the major world governments. You're talking that international cabal that is part of this. Okay, that is knowing this, and whatever the ultimate goal is, or the end part. One of the reasons that you say, well, what have they done for us? There is quite a bit of talk that has gone on about preventing the nuclear exchange after our atomic drops in World War II, that we see a lot of activity. Is that because they care about us, or they just don't want what they want to take over to be ruined?
Well, I agree with that one, the first one.
Do they lack the overall capability to just raise us from the face of the earth?
Well, you gentlemen are forgetting one thing, okay? Whatever it is they're doing, it's their agenda. There is nothing that says in their agenda that they owe us anything. Now, I happen to think it's highly probable that prior to the melting of the ice sheets 12,000 years ago, we, planet Earth, had an advanced civilization that through some means or whatever became aware of what was happening and abandoned the planet until it all washed out. About 1,000 years later, okay, when civilization, after another mini ice age happened, started to come back together, we got things like Göbekli Tepe, which nobody still to this day has a clue what the hell that was over in Turkey. And not only there, but a lot of places. These people that emigrated off-world probably came back. And for whatever reason this time, they didn't come back living on top of the surface, but they went beneath the surface. Now, over all the years that I've been in this field, I've come across many accounts of people spelunking in caves and what have you, that occasionally will run into some of these apparently very human-looking beings. And we have many Native American tales of people like the ant people, whatever, that came up and saved their lives during catastrophic events, took them underground. And the Indians value those people. Okay, you guys are all aware of this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But whatever it is they're doing, they have, you're right about this. They have a valid concern that some moron up here is going to set a nuke off. We saw, I'm sure you guys have read some accounts of the contactee movement back in the 50s. The FBI under J. Edgar Hoover was even sticking a microscope up their butt because they were giving what the FBI thought were pro-communist sentiments about getting rid of our nuclear weapons. There's always been, reportedly, a concern among these visitors, for the want of a better word, okay, about nukes. Now, in 1962, I was in junior high school when the Cuban Missile Crisis broke with President JFK. And my old man, okay, was called out, suited up. Okay, here's your rifle, here are your rations, blah, blah, blah. They thought they were going down, are you ready for this? To invade Cuba. Because Cuba had short-range Soviet nuclear weapons pointed at places like Miami. And the Pentagon, the Joint Chiefs, were threatening President Kennedy en masse of resigning if he didn't do something. They thought he was dithering around. They wanted to go in and strike the missile bases, but Kennedy held them off. And hey, as a kid, I was 12. As a kid, I was 12 years old. Of course, I had no idea what a nuclear event would be like, but I was convinced that they were going to use them as a kid. Now, that's a hell of a thing to put on a 12-year-old kid. But I wasn't the only one. It was all across the country. We came this close to nuclear annihilation.
I was the only kid that wasn't able to fit under my desk. Remember those desk drills? They said, Chris, you could just sit there. Don't worry about this.
All right. In an interesting segue, I'm going to bring up two names, two people I deeply respect. Very interesting people on the world stage. First, Buzz Aldrin. Buzz Aldrin successfully lands us on the moon. Second person after Neil Armstrong to step onto the moon. Makes some statements that he saw UFOs and then kind of retracted his statements later on. Now, I'm going to set aside any discussion that we didn't go to the moon. I'll gladly have a show about that. It's not really a UAP subject on someone else.
We went to the moon.
I completely agree. But I will play along and be polite if somebody else invites me onto a show to have that discussion. Well, I'm just trying to use good Christian virtue on that. My point is, if he is the number one person I would like to meet that is alive on the planet today is Buzz Aldrin, mainly to shake his hand and just and say thanks for what he's done. Incredible person in my mind, and lots of things that he has shared in the different books and stories. But he, among many astronauts, has talked about these events and these occurrences. And then they are kind of shuttled off. They start to get handled, packaged. Things start to come out into the press about them, about that there's behavioral changes. They're almost to the point of coming out and saying that there's senility and things like that going on. He changed his viewpoint that what he had seen, the UFO activity, the UAP activity, was simply the rockets, the boosters that had brought them to the moon, and was still in a decaying orbit going away, and that's what they saw as reflected. And there's other reports that come up. I'd like your take on Buzz Aldrin.
Me
Do you want me to start? Go ahead, Don.
Go ahead, Don.
Okay. Several things. Number one, the man is, and all of them, Collins, Aldrin, Buzz Aldrin, and Armstrong, the truest of true American heroes. Think about that. They were the first human beings to land on an alien planet in human history. Well, at least as far as our history goes.
In human recorded history by a vehicle we made, now that I completely qualified that statement.
Exactly. They were warned ahead of time. I am convinced. Let me make this clear. This is my speculation. They knew they were going to see something when they got up there. Now, why do I say that? Over 20 plus years of research on lunar transient phenomenon and artifacts on the moon. Okay. I spent over 20 years working on that. In 2014, finally, I was able to convince a TV producer to really take this thing in charge, this idea, this concept. Unfortunately, this producer ended up getting it on the Sci-Fi Channel. They managed to garbage it up somewhat. Okay. I had been holding on to some photographs that I got from NASA archives that showed pure, unimpeachable artifacts that shouldn't have been there if nobody's ever been to the moon before. Now, I personally believe, and I think there's a hell of a lot to support this, that there is a base on the side of the moon that we never see. Our moon is orbitally locked. We never see the far side. And I have pictures, photographs from NASA that show some very odd things on the rear of the moon. Now, with that being said, when we did this TV show in 2014, Buzz Aldrin was interviewed right after I was. I was, by the way, the research producer on that show. And the producer took over to Armstrong several of my photographs. And I've told you guys this story. When they placed him in front of him, he violently twisted his head away, adamantly refused to look at them. And furthermore, he didn't want to talk about the goddamn moon at all. The second human being in history to step on the moon. This guy will go down through all of human history. He didn't want to talk about the moon. What he wanted to talk about, what he would talk about, is going to Mars and finding out what that obelisk is on the Martian moonlet Phobos. Now, buddy, I have fought 10 years. I fought about that in my mind. This is what I think happened. They went to the moon. They came back. What did NASA and the government do? They put them in isolation. They couldn't see or talk to anybody.
Right.
Quarantine, they called it. I think
right.
These guys had their minds taken out and washed. And when they did turn them loose, several weeks later, you never saw a more dissolute looking, group of guys in your life. It was like they were all in a deep, deep, deep depression. What happened after that? Well, Armstrong became a total recluse. Collins disappeared from history. Buzz Aldrin became a roaring drunk. He cleaned up, okay? He cleaned up. But whatever happened up there affected them all deeply. And, I think that's what happened.
Chris.
Well, first of all, I'll agree with Don that Buzz Aldrin was an amazing American hero. So was Mitchell. So was Armstrong. These guys
Buzz
are all
Aldrin's
great.
still alive, by the way. He's not in the past.
Yeah, he's 93. He just got married again. I don't know if you know. You got to see the girl he married, man.
I wasn't invited. Wasn't invited to the wedding, so I'm not going to talk about it.
Wow, she's a beautiful blonde. At 93, you get married to somebody like that. Wow, he's still. I don't know. He's okay in my book. But anyways, Buzz Aldrin was a type of guy. He was flamboyant. I mean, out of all the astronauts that I know, he loved the publicity. He loved, talk. He loved the different things. He used to wear the colorful jackets and the colorful bow ties and, everything else about him. So he was a flamboyant personality. But one of the things I noticed he's done is he'd get a story going about, I saw aliens on the moon. Then, like Don says, he'd take it back. And same thing when he went to Antarctica. I saw evil. I saw the devil. Or, it all came out to this big story. And then it comes back and say, nah, he never said any of that stuff or anything like that. We all think that Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong and certainly Mitchell probably saw a craft. I think he reported, didn't he, Don? Mitchell, while he was
Edgar Mitchell? No,
not Mitchell. Who was the
Collins?
I'm sorry, I'm using the wrong name. Collins, I think, reported that there was an unidentified craft as he was circling around the moon. So, I mean, you have these stories. But Buzz Aldrin, he's a flamboyant guy, as I said. And I think that, I hate to say it this way because he is a true American hero, that the stories about him get embellished. And you don't know where to go with some of the stories about Buzz Aldrin. But God bless him. In '93, he gets married again. He's great in my book.
Well, what I saw in that TV production, Aliens on the Moon, The Truth Revealed is the name of it. I saw that with my own eyes. There's nothing
Don,
embellished about that.
No, Don, I don't disagree that there's aliens on the moon. I think there is a base on the
No,
moon.
what him refusing to look at any of the lunar photographs or wanting to talk about the moon. That's why I say I think they took his brain out and they washed it and put it back.
Yeah, but then again, why would he talk about Mars? Mars can also be as convincing as a base on Mars.
We sent astronauts to Mars?
Well, there's always been those stories that there's been a base on Mars, but what strikes me is that what you said was he doesn't want to talk about the moon, but he wants to talk about Mars and something unusual on Mars. So why is he pointing to that story, but yet adamantly refuses to talk about the moon? So, I mean, it's not like he's saying, I don't want to talk about UFOs at all. I don't want to talk about anything that's extraterrestrial. I don't want to talk about stuff. He's pointing in a certain direction. You know, if they washed his brain, they didn't do a good job because he's doing stuff about Mars. So that kind of says,
you still punch guys out, too.
Yeah.
Well, considering what he went through and how close they came to dying on that mission and successfully getting there and coming back. Pretty impressive.
Well,
okay.
Do you have anything to say about that though?
You've talked about this in the past, and it's just one of those things, the fascinating things I would like to know more about why he got to that point. But, you know, as you said, they all experienced a certain level of PTSD. I slightly disagree with you on the recluse part, but I think it's a fair way to sum up. I have a very good friend who flew many times with Neil Armstrong. He's a former Navy pilot and then got into the business of flying VIPs out of California. And he spent much time with Neil Armstrong. He's got some of the funniest stories with Bob Hope, Neil Armstrong on an airplane he's flying with. Just talks about the absolute stellar quality that Neil Armstrong had. I don't remember him ever really speaking much about Buzz Aldrin. That's a good point I need to bring up next time I speak with him. So obviously there's almost a PTSD that's gone on here. I absolutely agree with you, Don. It seems almost trite how the conditioning when they came back and the possibility, you know, in this isolation that they had to be to keep them separated until we could show that there was no microbes and stuff going on. That itself is worth a show all on its own.
That was the cover story.
Right.
That was the cover story.
Was it a cover story that we also knew something was there and there was a possibility of bringing something back? There's another aspect to that you have to look at on balance. That if there is some knowledge that something was there, or if there was some indication and now you've tripped over it and you bring it back into our atmosphere that's oxygenated, will you reactivate something? I think there's something, there's a little more on that. Collins went on to write the book. He did a number of appearances. He became a senior statesman of sorts at NASA. He did a really good job with the future astronaut corps going out into the future. Obviously, something's happened there. But I also think in the case of someone like Mr. Aldrin, Colonel Aldrin, that a lot of folks, I don't think, had his best interest in mind and were happy to let him get into self-destructive paths that he successfully fought himself out of. He was a combat veteran, flew combat missions. So he found his way back. He had probably one of the worst adjustments of any of the three of them, probably followed by Neil Armstrong to some extent, on how they, when they returned back. But what were parts of that experience I think that there's some credibility to what he originally said. It's the changing of the story. It's the trying to change it. And then you have this kind of an encounter you did, which really just throws to me, it doesn't seem in character. He seems like somebody that's going to not take any kind of BS and just, and say it. Or did they hold something over him? I think about some of the personalities that have faced some real adversity outside of our discussion here in UAP, where if you don't go along with the story, we're going to do things to your family, especially your children and your grandchildren. And that's the kind of threat that works best against people in their roles that have, generations behind them that they want protected. So I can see where that can lead to a lot of discourse. All right, next name. Another what I consider of the greats. Another larger than life personality. Gordo Cooper.
Wow.
Here's a man from the Mercury program. I think a little mythologized. I think his legend was left a little bit bigger than life, but I think some of the things that we've read and seen about him do portray the way he has been seen in film and what he's talked about in books. In fact, I think that might be also played up because he has spoken early and consistently and at the end of his life extensively about extraterrestrials and UFO experiences that he had. Chris, I'll start with you.
Once again, he is my idea of an American hero, just like Buzz Aldrin. These guys don't have to make up stories. There's, you got to take what he says with a lot of credibility because he's a famous astronaut. He doesn't need publicity. He's got all he wants. He was a great astronaut. He was a hell of a test pilot too. And, if he's telling cockamamie stories, I believe he made the rank of colonel. Am I right on that, Commander? All right.
Yeah.
So they don't give the rank of colonel to people who make up stupid stories.
Oh, I don't know about that. Obviously, you have not had experience with as many colonels and captains as I have. But
I have, but I'm talking about an astronaut. I'm not talking about.
That's like saying that in the law enforcement agency, only the top people make captain and commissioner.
No. We're talking strictly astronauts now. I've worked for some really dumb people, but I will tell you, when it comes to Gordon Cooper, they're not going to make an astronaut who starts with a story, a crazy story, as a colonel. That's just not going to happen, I believe, in the astronaut field. But to me, first he talks about his experience as a test pilot, and then he talks about, the stuff that he saw as a landing and everything. I truly believe Gordon Cooper's story. I think he's legit. I can't see where he's changed his story at all. I can't see where he's embellished it. I can't see where he's done anything that he wanted publicity out of it. He's he's done a real remarkable good life.
So let's quickly just touch upon one of the events. He's out, they're doing work. He has the high-speed camera crew that's recording some of the stuff they're going to do for test. They have as he calls it, the classical saucer that comes down. The landing gear extends out of it. It touches down. This crew is getting closer. These guys are professionals. They're taking really, really good photographs of this craft, and then it takes off and disappears. He gets the film. He reports it. The film, he's told to stop talking about it, and it's confiscated or it disappears into the system, I think is probably a better way to put it. He follows the protocol that's there.
They sent a special courier out to pick it up.
That's right. And it's interesting that there was a protocol for these kinds of events. He knew what to do with it. Now, it didn't end his career. It possibly even accelerated it, if you think about it. It didn't slow him down. He didn't get sent to some place to be debriefed, as far as we can tell. Nothing changed with him personality-wise from this event. Now, this is not the only thing that's occurred. He and his fellow pilots flying F-86s when stationed in Germany years before this launch for activity that is over a central part of the Federal Republic of Germany, otherwise known as West Germany. They're involved in this. Again, openly talks about this. Goes to the space program. There's all kinds of reports in Mercury. Excuse me. During the Mercury program of things that are seen they're not openly dismissed, but they're explained away.
He had a sighting on his last Mercury flight.
Correct. As well as he goes at the end of his career, or cruising towards the close to the end of his life, he addresses the UN on this subject. So, Don, give me the pickup where you have on Mr. Cooper.
Well, Vicki and I knew Colonel Cooper. He had an office over in Van Nuys. We went over there one day, spent a whole day with him, interviewed him extensively. He gave me all those stories, the landing at Edwards, the overflights in Germany, flying the Sabres. I asked him, I've never been a pilot. So I really, there's tons that I don't know about that. And apparently the F-86, he was flying Sabre jets, could not reach the altitude that these things were at. What was the ceiling on that, Deuce? Was that about 40,000?
I was going to say, at best, probably 50,000, but most likely they would have stopped at 40,000 without a pressure suit on. It would have been a 40 to 45,000 foot altitude.
Right. So anyway, and I asked him, I said, well, what do you think they were? Do you have any idea? And he said something at the time struck me kind of funny, but he said, I can't really say. He said, in one regard, they resembled like great seed pods flying. Okay? Seed pods. What the hell does that mean? I don't know. But then there was something else that he talked about. Now, his book was in the process of coming out, and I reviewed his book, for UFO magazine. And my favorite NASA spokesperson then attacked him. And when the book came out, and I got into it with him. I'm talking about, of course, Jim Oberg. Okay. Oberg and I went at it hammer and tong. And I'll say something else about Jim in regards to this. I said, well, you seem pretty convinced that Colonel Cooper is at best embellishing these claims, or at worst, outright lying. So I'll tell you what I would like to do. I'd like to bring you on my radio show, and you can lay out your proof. Well, I ended up inviting over probably, and this is no lie, maybe 25 times to come on my show. And a friend of mine who also had some contact with Oberg said, he said, I'm going to see if I can get him to talk. So my friend approached Oberg, and Oberg said, I'm not going to go on his show. Well, why not? Because he has control of the microphone. Now, in all the years that I've been broadcasting, I have never once shut anybody off. I have never censored them. I have never given them a list of questions. None of that. It's all been totally organic. You guys have both been on my show. You know that I'm not one of those heavy-handed guys, that if I don't like what you're saying, I'm going to cut you off. That's not how it works with me. But this guy, to boil it all down, was a chicken shit. Okay? That's it. Chicken shit. The idea that Cooper, the man of that stature and those accomplishments, and the guy was humble. Okay, let me tell you that he was not. You see these things about fighter jocks, okay, brash and jumping around. I just sent through something the other day about fighter pilots on Skype. He knows what I'm talking about. That was not Gordon Cooper.
Nope.
Okay.
And it really wasn't any of the other people we've talked about tonight. Michael Collins, negative. Buzz Aldrin, negative.
When Colonel Cooper died, we lost a great man. And that's where I come down on him. The man was truly one of my heroes. One of my most proud possessions I have. You guys might have seen, I might have shown you a picture of him and I, okay, together when we were over there interviewing him. I had the utmost admiration for him.
Can I just add, Commander, I just wanted to add, something you struck there, and I was looking it up. You were right when he addressed the United Nations back in 1985, but did you know he was on the Merv Griffin show? I'm kind of telling my age now, but he was on the Merv Griffin show and actually said we had an extraterrestrial body. And that was one of the points. He actually said that the government has been covering up the secret, and I'm going to do my best to get it out there until his death when he was 77 years old. But he went to the Washington Post with this story. He went to Merv Griffin show on television with this story. And
what year was the Merv Griffin show where he made that remark? Do you remember?
I don't remember the date, but I did read an article that he was on the Merv Griffin show that he actually admitted that.
So the reason I bring that up is in the White House in these years when these things are occurring with Cooper, with Aldrin and others, Richard Nixon. I don't know if Ford's stance on
Jackie Gleason.
He should have been in the White House. We probably would have had a much better time. And even Jimmy Carter, who also professes to have had a UFO experience when he was actually, I believe, running for governor in Georgia, when he was really getting his political career started. So almost a hospitable or an accepting administration in there. Things have radically changed from those days. In fact, I would even say how innocent the time was in comparison to where we are now, and activities that we have since gone through. So, Don, what is the book that you would recommend? The book that you did the review on Gordon Cooper for those that are listening, because I'm getting a couple emails asking about that, and I have an email saying, how can we see the pictures that Don's talking about?
Well, Chris is online. Chris, can you? I have it over here on my bookshelf, but
what do you want, there, big guy?
I don't recall.
Is it Gordon Cooper's autobiography?
Basically, yes.
Okay. And how about the pictures? I'll look it up while we're talking.
Which pictures?
The ones you talked about, the moon that you showed to, or attempted to show to Colonel Aldrin.
Well, they may be up there. I don't know where the hell they are. Look for Aliens on the Moon, The Truth Revealed. That was a TV show. And they may have some of them up here. I've got a couple of copies, actually, of that show. By the way, you know when that show aired?
No.
July the 20th. The anniversary.
The anniversary of the landing.
Touchdown.
Yep.
Yes.
It's also the anniversary of my first. It's the anniversary of my first solo flight in an airplane. 10 years after the landing on the moon. 79.
Really?
Yep.
Yep.
Leap of
July
faith.
The 20th.
It's leap of faith. I couldn't remember
Leap of faith. That's right.
Here it is. Aliens on the Moon. TV show adds weird UFO twists on Apollo tales. So, and they talk about the show here. The pixels in a photograph can be funny things, as demonstrated time and time again in Aliens on the Moon, The Truth Exposed, a TV documentary airing on Sunday, 45th anniversary of the historic Apollo 11 moon landing. But they do not have any pictures, Don. Well, they got one, but there's nothing in it. The shape, I'm looking at something, but there's nothing in the picture that they got.
I'll tell you what I'll do, guys. I'll send you both some photographs. I have them digitized, and you'll be able to take a look at them.
Appreciate that.
And
for those folks that are listening, when I get permission from Don Ecker, and if you drop me an email, I will send you what I'm allowed to send. But
now, you wanted me to look at something for G. Gordon Cooper. What did you want me to find?
No, it was me looking up the book. It was his book,
Leap of Faith.
Leap of Faith. I was just a couple of people had asked me on an email while we were on the show here, because they know I'm sometimes I'm blocked from the comments. So
somebody got you persona non grata there, Commander Cobra?
No, they're asking me about your pictures. Oh, I don't know.
No.
I think it's a conspiracy with you two.
Not a conspiracy. You could see all you want, but here's the book: Leap of Faith: Astronaut's Journey into the Unknown. G. Gordon Cooper was one of the original Mercury 7 astronauts, a select group of the nation's top military test pilots who braved the frontiers of space in the days when strapping yourself into a rocket meant that you would be either 100 miles up or 6 feet under. Yeah. Today, he
Gus Grissom found out, didn't he?
Nation's history. So, this looks like a book I definitely have to get by Bruce Henderson. And unfortunately, it does not show any pictures to it. But we all know G. Gordon Cooper, American hero, truth maker, and I believe his stories.
And he seems to me to be someone that was not corruptible on this subject. All right.
I don't think he was corruptible, but I know he probably got a lot of flack and somebody tell him, keep your damn mouth shut. Because a lot of astronauts have come out and said,
Don,
hey, you know.
Don, did you have any kind of ever get any kind of a inference from him that occurred? He seems to me to be kind of bulletproof, that he seemed to just...
The only thing he told me that would maybe go down that alleyway is that out at Edwards, he said after his crew came back and they immediately took that, it was film, okay, took it in to be processed. He made the call. He was informed they would send out a special courier to pick that up. After it was developed, he was not to put it on any mechanical devices to observe what they saw or anything else. But he told me that when the thing was developed, they brought it back, he unrolled some film and looked at individual pictures on it. The frames. And then he wrapped it back up, put it in a pouch, and this guy came out, flew in, came into the office, he handed him the bag, the guy walked out, and that was it. Now, later, people tried to track this down by going through Blue Book. Now, this happened in 57, all right? That's when this incident recounted by Cooper happened. And Blue Book had zero, zip, nada, nilch, any reference to it whatsoever. So take that for what it's worth.
Well, no discussion is complete for me on what these gentlemen, without bringing up Gene Cernan, last man to stand on the moon. Someone I actually did get to meet and talk with. I found him to be one of the most captivating and a true gentleman. Paid myself and many, many others the greatest compliment I think could ever have been bestowed. He thanked all the people who didn't get selected to be an astronaut that were out there still doing the work, because when he had finished a combat tour in Vietnam and then he went into the space program. And he always thanked the people that weren't selected, that wanted to do what he got selected to do, and was able to go to the moon to go do that. And I also think of he's one of the few that I cannot find any reference, and I was not in a setting where I could ask him. Quite honestly, it was just not, even something was on my mind when I met him, about any experience or what his feelings on ETs were. I've yet to really ever uncover anything about him where he has given an opinion on that. But to almost every person that has flown in space in the astronaut program, and in a number of those in the other countries, mainly Soviet and Russian, there seems to be a shared experience where this is not far from the realm of their understanding, belief, or acceptance. But Gene Cernan wrote his daughter's name on the surface of the moon as kind of a tribute to her. And I thought that was always a very cool dad thing to do. All right, we're coming up to the last bit of the show.
Can I make one remark before
Absolutely.
Before
you can make two remarks, maybe three.
Yesterday, August the 7th, was the anniversary of America's oldest military medal and decoration, the Purple Heart.
Marc, correct.
I am proud to state that I was the commander of the Military Order of the Purple Heart Hollywood chapter, which was begun by none other than Audie Murphy, the most highly decorated American serviceman during the Second World War, who had every medal imaginable, including the Medal of Honor.
Correct.
And yesterday, I saw very, very little mention of it. It was an award created by General George Washington. And on the medal, it says for military merit. But it later, after World War I, then was presented to Americans, both posthumously and those living, as a medal for wounds received in action. I, at the risk of sounding like I'm bragging, I'm not. I have 2 Purple Hearts, and it means a hell of a lot to me. And most people today really don't take these things into their consideration. But I got to say, to any man or woman that served in the armed forces, it means a hell of a lot. And with that being said, I thank you.
And we thank you. That's the hardest one to earn in my mind. Now, one last thing. The Mideast is in kind of crazy turns and twists, and the country of Iran is at the precipice of many things. In 1979, I believe, let me just check the date very quickly. Sorry, I got to check the note. I didn't memorize it correctly. 19th. In 76, Iranian Air Force launched to a very large hovering object over Tehran. That part of the world has long history with reports of contact, UFO, UAP activity. I bring that up also with the fact that there is a cultural comfort, ability to, it's just not that far off in that part of the world for many of the groups that live in that part of the world, understanding the possibility or the connection with extraterrestrials as part of the culture, as part of getting contact, wisdom. In fact, one of Don's favorite movies that he got me hooked on, that part of the world features prominently as the place where events occur that during a conflict, how contact is made and how it transforms into our modern age. Thoughts of cultures that are more open. We only have about a minute left, so we'll make this one quick. Are there some cultures that are just more open to this understanding? I think Don has done us really good histories in the past explaining. You go back to the place where the Bible starts from, where the Quran starts from, those origins, there seems to be a lot more connection.
Don't forget India.
And India. Well, I have to be careful when I almost say. I'll say that southwest part of Asia. How's that? That covers that area. That's SWAT. Yay, nay. Think that's the origin area, because that's where we think we started.
Well, that's where the Sumerian texts claim that the Anunnaki, the visitors, those who from heaven came to earth, basically ended up landing in what today is, well, Iraq, Syria, and parts of Iran, Mesopotamia. And that seemed to be where they came down originally. Now,
all right,
you got to remember
Don,
too.
Hold on, Don. We're 30 seconds. I got to give Chris a quick go. We'll pick this up on the next time we go. Chris,
I have done some research where the India has always been openly about their culture, especially the past, where they have thought that there's been nuclear wars by different extraterrestrial races and visitation by other races in there. So India and that type of stuff really fascinates me, and I think that it's all true.
you guys are the best. The audience that listens, I thank you. You are the best audience on the planet. Talk to you in a week. Out.